So many years ago, I was young and idealistic, and I was going to change the world. I moved from the corporate sector into the nonprofit sector, and soon started working for a foundation. Well, it quickly became obvious that the world was probably a bit beyond my ability, that I was going to change my country. When that was a bit much, I settled on my community. And I poured my heart and my soul into my job, as did most of my colleagues. I made great grants. I worked with fantastic nonprofits. And after years working in the sector, I realized things hadn't changed. Oh, had we helped people? Yes, never a bad thing. But were the problems decreasing? No. If anything, they were getting worse. The needle was going up and not going down, no matter how much we did, how much we invested, how hard we worked. And I remember sitting around with some of my colleagues and bemoaning the fact that there was duplication of service in the community. Have you heard that? Yeah. Oh, and those nonprofits, you know, they don't know how to collaborate very well. And there's all these turf wars. If somehow we could get them working better and smarter, then we could solve these problems. What we didn't do is look at ourselves. We didn't look to say, can we work better? Can we collaborate better? We all know the old saying, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, that's what philanthropy was doing. They were funding and acting in the same way and somehow expecting everybody else to solve the problems. Well, soon my idealism turned to doubt and then to actual cynicism. It's not that I stopped wanting to help people, but I stopped believing that we could truly change things, that we could actually solve those big problems, that really all we could do was continue to help a small number of people and pat ourselves on the back for the great job we were doing. But then a few years ago, something happened that changed the way I looked at things. And it was actually a job posting. It was a job posting for Catalytic Philanthropy, a wordy way of saying philanthropy that actually does something that works. And in this job posting, it said that not only must philanthropy do something differently and make major change, it actually is doing it in certain places. Well, needless to say, without much thought, I put in my application, and 5 years later, here I am working for Funders Together. And in those 5 years, I have seen how philanthropy, not on their own, but together with communities, together with providers and advocates and government and people with lived experience, is actually making that needle change, making it go down, solving problems. Again, not on their own, but by working differently, more effectively, looking at the system, at the big issues, they are solving problems. But before we talk about that, I want to spend a couple minutes talking about traditional philanthropy. This is the philanthropy that I'm sure all of us know and love. You all adore your funders, right? Yes. Yes, I should say that I am now a provider. Okay, I have to fundraise, so which every funder should have to do. You should have to be on the other side before you ever are a funder. So I'm no longer a funder. But traditional philanthropy is what I call ATM philanthropy. You know, the bank machine? So what happens, nonprofits figure out how much money they need to do their work. They fill out that grant application, and they give it to the funder. That's their PIN number, right, for the ATM, is that grant application. And if it's the right PIN number, if it's the right grant application, you get the money and you take it to pay for the work you're doing. And then when the money starts running out, you go back to the ATM. Or hopefully you have a whole bunch of ATMs, right? You get money. Now, this isn't a terrible system, it's worked. It's supported nonprofits. It's paid for good stuff to happen. It's okay. But what it doesn't do is solve major problems. And I would say that there are 3 reasons why this is the case. One, ATM Philanthropy tends to be program or organization focused. It looks at a small piece of the big puzzle. It's much easier for philanthropy, for funders, to wrap their heads around those small pieces. Secondly, it's usually time limited. Have you ever experienced a funder coming to you and saying, "We don't want you to rely on our funding"? Okay, so we're only going to grant to you for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, and then you need to look for someone else to support your work. And you spend half your time trying to get the money to do the work you need to do. Sound familiar? And thirdly, this kind of philanthropy sets up what I call compliance. So in other words, we spend more time worrying about what the funder wants and what the funder needs from us than we do what our clients need or what the system needs. And we have to chisel ourselves off, the square peg into the round funder hole. That sounds really bad. But we have to turn ourselves into what the funder wants to get money. Okay? So this is not going to get us to where we need to be, because we need to look at the big issues at solving the problems. So let's talk for a moment about what philanthropy can do to affect this kind of change. Well, again, the first thing you need to look at is, what is the vision that you are trying to create? What is the reality that you want? Now, funders should never determine what that is. They sometimes try, but that's not their job. But what they can do is they can help a community have a safe space to create that vision. They can pay for the visioning process. They can bring people to the table. I can tell you, if my phone rang and I answered it and somebody says, "Hi, Anne, this is Bill Gates. Would you come to lunch and talk about some visioning?" I'm there. Well, that's true of philanthropy. You can get people to the table. So philanthropy can make the visioning process happen in a community. So now you have your vision of where you want to be, the whole community, however you define that community. But before you can get there, you need to know where you are. And this is a step a lot of people forget. You need to have an in-depth understanding of where the community is, beyond your own experience and your own program, right? What do you need for that? You need the dreaded D word, data. Okay, funders talk about the importance of data. Do they want to pay for it? Not so much. We have to make sure that funders understand that data is so sexy. Yeah, okay, maybe you can't take your picture beside a smiling chart, but it can change the world. You need to have that data to understand where you are and where you need to go. Now, the problem is, how do you get from here to here? Now, some funders like to tell you how to do it. They're not the ones, okay? They're not the experts in the pathway. That's the people who are on the ground, that are doing the job. That's the people with lived experience. But what funders can do is they can provide the tools to help you build the path. They can provide research, pay for research, collect best practices, connect you to people who are doing it in other communities. They can also, and this is very important, look at evaluation as you build the path. Because if it was simple to build, if we knew exactly how to do it, we'd be there already. So there are going to be mistakes, and we're going to hit potholes, and we're going to go in the wrong direction. You need the evaluation to make sure that you're in the right direction. And then the funders need to pay for those course corrections. They need to be tolerant of the, oops, we went the wrong way, we need to go this way. They need to be in it for the long term, because we all know Rome was not built in a day, nor was getting to a community vision. So they need to fund for the long term. Now, we all know, right? We've all worked in community. The change is simple. Everybody wants it to happen, right? Not so much. Systems, people, organizations love the status quo. They may not say that. They may say they want change, but when it comes down to it, we don't want to change. So we have barriers in this process. And sometimes we come smack dab up against those brick walls. It could be the organization that's giving us a headache. It could be turf wars. Anybody here experience turf wars? All of these things. It could be policies. One of the biggest barriers out there to this kind of change is the capacity of the organizations that are trying to make it happen. We expect nonprofits to do all the great work that they're doing with their clients, at the same time figure out how to change and take a systems approach and do collective impact and all of those things. That takes resources. It takes staff, it takes technology, it takes training, it takes the capacity. So funders need to fund the process and the capacity of organizations to get there. And finally, something that a lot of funders avoid like the plague, but is absolutely necessary if we are going to make change happen, they need to advocate. They need to be advocates and change public opinion, work with our politicians, change policies, make sure we get enough government funding, develop public-private partnerships to move things forward. Funders are often afraid of this, and yet it is absolutely necessary. And if they are not your advocates, you need to talk to them. And you don't need to use the word advocacy. Use education, right? It's the way you can get some of those funders. It is absolutely necessary. So funders can fund the community to get to the vision. They can fund and support the reality, looking at the reality of where they are, and they can support building this pathway between the two. They can help us move from where we are to where we need to be, not alone, but in partnership, walking side by side with the rest of the community. But what is needed for them to do this? Because again, nobody really likes to change. We're all pretty comfortable working the way we've always worked. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's the willingness on the part of those who are accepting the money to let go of your personal ATM. And it's hard. Like I say, I have to fundraise. I know what it's like. But you have to be willing to have that conversation with your funding to say, it's about the big picture. It's not just about my organization. If nonprofits come together and say, we want to make change in our community, and we need our funders to come along with us, you're going to get some pretty good responses for the most part. But it's hard, it's tough, and it's scary. On the part of philanthropy, what is needed? Well, funders need to be bold and do things differently. They need to get out of their policies and priorities and procedures and grant applications and report backs and all the way they've done it and say, how do we get to the end result? They need to be flexible, they need to be fearless, they need to advocate, they need to take risks, and above all, they need to be tolerant of failure. Because this path is not easy, there will be failure. And in fact, if there isn't failure, you're not doing what you should be doing. You're not being innovative, you're not moving forward. So you need to have these conversations with your funders. Figure out how boldly go where no funder has gone before, and really look at how do you create a system, a reality, a new and better reality for the people you are trying to serve.